Well, as the big man said, let's go. We are ready. It is time to turn around this, what seems to be a rapidly sinking ship at La Viola in Firenze, and we're going to see how we can fix what is going on at Fiorentina, and if we can give Pioli a little bit of help, a bit of advice to try and turn things round. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. Adam, kind of sum up the situation for us. How bad is it looking?
It's not looking too pretty, especially when you consider the next game that they face is Milan, and that's the prime time slot on Sunday. But thereafter, they've also got some really tough fixtures, and that also includes the likes of, obviously, you've got Rapid Vienna in the Conference League before they face Bologna in the Tuscan derby at home, before they are away again at the San Siro to take on Inter. That feels like there's some really tough fixtures there. Thereafter, though, Rory, you kind of see maybe a bit of light for Pioli, and maybe speculate that if he's still there by the end of those kind of three fixtures in the league, then he's got Lecce at home and then an away tie to Genoa. So winnable games, it's fair to say, thereafter. But I think given the kind of style of football recently from Fiorentina, the shortcomings, and there's plenty of them, it also stems to it, and it feels from a Fiorentina fan perspective that he's not maybe making the right choices. The kind of lineup in terms of the formation isn't great. It's probably contributing towards the fact that they're not creating enough for the likes of Moise Kean and, for example, Albert Gudmundsson. But then, when he's putting on Piccoli, for example, and Dzeko, you're kind of changing the dynamics of the game. But if you're not getting the service to them, then that's probably part of your issue, right? But it's also defensively, Rory, that they seem very weak at the back. I did allude to it in the previous game week where I said I think they're missing that kind of defensive midfielder that can help transition the ball into attacking positions. So I think there's a lot to discuss there in terms of what we're going to try and help Pioli, or if it was one of us being on Football Manager, trying to turn around this season, right?
Well, absolutely. And I think the first thing for me, if we're going to go, like, I'm setting up the save, I'm looking at my squad, I'm looking at the tactics, first thing I'm doing is going to four at the back. That's the first thing I'm doing. I think this is also kind of backed up by the fact that the only time Fiorentina have looked impressive kind of this season was against Como. I want to say they came back from 2-0 down, or they came back late on in that game. And in that game, they were playing four at the back. And I feel like it is the time when they've looked the most impressive. I feel like it would give them a little bit more solidity, weirdly, and I think it would allow them to put a bit more threat up front. Now, once I go for it at the back with this squad, what I'm then doing, not to go too far ahead, is I'm trying to find some wingers. For a long time, it feels like Fiorentina have been selling their wide attackers or selling their creative players, and they haven't really replaced them. Even a player like Nico Gonzalez.
Yep.
Obviously, he went to Juve. He was a bit hot and cold for Fiorentina as well, but they've not replaced a player like that. And I don't think they have someone with that profile. Like, I feel like there's just, I'm going four at the back, and I'm not relying so heavily on the wing backs that aren't producing offensively. Like, defensively, they're relatively solid, but I just don't think they give you that offensive output enough, especially someone like Robin Ghost.
No, I agree. I mean, you've got Dodo coming off the back of last season as well on that right-hand side. He's great defensively, he's great offensively as well, but maybe not being utilised. And the way I look at it, Rory, is that they've got very central-based players, so they're very narrow in terms of the style of football. And you can kind of see it as well, because it almost feels like the formation is almost like a Christmas tree formation, where you've got kind of a solid base, so to speak, in the midfield perspective, with maybe attacking players behind the main striker, but it does feel like it's not as fluid. Maybe people are getting mixed up in terms of their roles, getting in the way of each other potentially. But the biggest thing, as we allude to, is the lack of creation from those wing kind of positions. You need a solid foundation at the back as well. As you allude to, three at the back doesn't seem to be working. I don't know, personally for me, I'm not against a three in the back, and I know we've shared offline that three in the back isn't a bad thing. It could be just the personnel, and this is where I'm going to kind of stick with a three at the back in comparison to you. But there will be also focus for wingers as well in my squad in terms of desirable players that I'd love to bring in the January transfer window as well.
So with your three at the back, who are you wanting? Because obviously losing Camuzzo was a big thing, right? That's huge. And Pablo Mari has had to step in. Is that the first thing you're doing? You're bringing in a new centre back to kind of solidify that's better or a bit more steady than him?
And I've listed a few options because I don't know about, availability and how easily it would be to get those deals done, for example. But this is kind of the way that I've looked at it, Rory, is I've got 4 choices at centre back that I'd love to see if Fiorentina could try and bring in. So I'll kind of whittle them down. So my first, well, it's not necessarily my first choice, but one of the choices is Harry Maguire on a loan move from Man United, because I think the pace of the game would suit him. He could keep better control. He could be quite good in both boxes. I think that would really suit him in a back three, as he traditionally does for England as well. So I think that would be quite good. The other option I've put down here is Mario Gila from Lazio. I think right age, right kind of aspects in terms of a club that they could try and tempt to force a sale, given, Lazio could do the money, right? They could do with the money. Another option I put down was Omar Soule from Udinese, because I think he offers you slightly different dynamic, but in terms of a player that can defend and offer that offensive element as well, be progressive, and potentially there's that option, should we say, that he could be even worth furthermore in the future. So a sell-on ability. And then another one I've put down here, because he's been frozen out at this current club. He was a good centre-back when they signed him from Chelsea. It's Andreas Christensen at Barcelona.
Wow.
What deal that could be done, I don't know. But again, in terms of profile, really tall, commanding centre-back. If you think about experience, I think any of those 4 options that I've said is probably an upgrade on Mari already. And it's just a question of who you play either side. I think Luca Ranieri is always one that works hard. From Grancic, I'll give his due. He's worked really hard this season. He seems to be a bit more settled since his move from Lecce as well. So I think that's probably my thinking, is that I would maintain those 2 in the 3, but with the addition of one of those centre-backs. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, the one I like the most is Sole from Udinese, because I think he's ready for a step up, but I don't know if one of the bigger teams are ready to come in for him yet. I think he's leading the league in terms of like progressive passes, and his pass completion rate is through the roof. He does still have the odd lapse in concentration and can get caught in possession, but I think a move to Fiorentina could be great for both parties. The only thing is, obviously, we don't know how much money we're fictionally giving Fiorentina here, but I suspect Udinese are going to be asking for quite a lot of money for one of their hottest prospects. I think the loan market is a relatively, is a clever thing to do. It's kind of how they got De Gea, right? High-profile player, not really
free transfer, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Not really kind of getting the football they need. I think a Christensen from Barcelona could be quite realistic, to be honest, because you don't have to cover, the wages aren't going to be too through the roof. Whereas with Harry Maguire, I think even 20% of his wage, Fiorentina are going to be struggling. So I like the Christensen and Sole shouts. I think Sole getting in there before one of the other teams takes him would be a really good move, and would allow you to continue with the 3 at the back, which is something that Pioli does favour, right? He does favour a 3 in the back system. So I don't realistically think he's going to switch to a 4 at the back. I think he's going to try and stick with this. His thesis he did at Converciano was on 3 at the back, right? So it's very much his thing. He kind of knows plenty about it. So I think, maybe a switch in personnel. Obviously, the Camuzzo injury, I think with him in the middle, I think it does look a bit more solid. So I think maybe getting a more experienced player, like you said, like Christensen, as a short-term fix, as opposed to bankrolling into a younger prospect, is a good move. If we move forward into the wing-back roles, because this is what they're really depending on, right? This has become quite a problem now, is the fact that they're not getting offensive output from their wing-backs. I'm going to kind of throw a name out, and I'm not sure how controversial this is going to be, but he's been one of the bigger creators for a team that are struggling. He might be looking for a way out. I might be tapping up Parma for Valeri. I might be saying, as a left wing-back, is there any chance that maybe we can take him and he'll be a bit more productive than Gosens? He's 26, so coming into his prime years. He's proven in the league. I think he often impresses. I think he could be a step up. That if we're looking at, you're going to stick with this wing-back system, well, let's get one who creates chances and creates chances in a struggling side around and surrounded by better players. Maybe he's gonna improve again. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be against it. Certainly, he's one of those that has performed really well this season in particular. So, it's one of those considerations. I've got another name that I'll throw out, but before we kind of do that, what's your kind of thoughts about Perez? Because he had such promise when they brought him in from Empoli, but it just hasn't really transitioned. Would you give him another shot?
I think because we know what his potential is, you have to kind of give him a few more chances. But it feels like he's only really getting chances in the Conference League at the moment. That's the only real time they trust him, which does say a lot. I'd be tempted to give him a bit, like, just to see if he can do any better, because I feel like they're getting so little from Gosens at the minute that it's worth trying. It's worth trying something else. And even you can't go into the transfer market tomorrow, right? So let's just see how it goes. Obviously, maybe not against Milan in their next game.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
See if even coming off the bench later on, or because Gosens, again, getting a bit older, maybe he can't finish 90 minutes,
well, this
but
is
kind of easing him into the team a little bit more. I think there's still absolutely a player there, but are they going to be able to give him the consistent minutes for him to thrive? I don't know, but I still want to believe that he can reach those levels, because I was very excited about him for a short time.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. So the name I was going to throw out is Filip Kostic, who is currently at Juve.
Not heard that name in a very long time.
I know, but I just think he hasn't really necessarily been given his due, because, he's been frozen out really more recently. And I just think there is still a player in him, because we saw that at Frankfurt, and he kind of used to play that wing back role. And this is the thing, when you're thinking about that left-hand side in terms of creativity, what is he good at? He's good at getting crosses into the box. That was his number one job that he did at Frankfurt, and he did that really well. I feel like that is an opportunity to get him in on loan, for example, in January. You can imagine him just being a bit more fired up, because he's got a club that actually believes in him. And can you imagine the kind of service he could deliver for the likes of Moise Kean, or like even the taller strikers like your Piculis and, for example, Dzeko's, being able to get on the end of like opportunities. I think that is literally what Fiorentina are crying out for. I appreciate he's probably on the other side in terms of his age profile, where you kind of start questioning whether longevity and whether he would have injuries, because he has had a few injuries at Juventus, it's fair to say as well. But for me, that is kind of the profile that I'd love to see them try and go for. A bit more ambitious kind of shout out here would be, and I don't know how feasible it is, probably unlikely, because this is our like hypotheticals,
DiMarco.
right?
No way.
No, I was actually going to say Lookman from Atalanta, because that's why. And this is where Kostic is a bit more realistic. But if you're thinking about a player that potentially, Atalanta don't want to lose money on him, but may not want to see him in the squad. If you're thinking about that kind of profile of player, and I appreciate he's been predominantly played as a free or like a attacking player, I think that's the kind of player that you could afford to have on those sides, being able to just draw out like opportunities for players up ahead of him as well. So I just think, can you imagine the connection between him and Moise Kean? That would be something to watch. But if I'm being realistic, Kostic is probably more realistic at this equation.
I think Lookman, sorry, Fiorentina fans, I think Lookman sees himself above a move to Fiorentina. I think he's very much looking in one side of Milan for that move, right? He's very much got his eyes fixed on that. The only thing that concerns me about Kostic is that his form really dropped off a cliff at Juve. Like, I remember, because I clearly remember getting him in Fantacalcio, because he had one season where he was killing it. And then I got him, and he did nothing. And I'm concerned that drop off, and the fact that he's not played regular football in a very long time, it could be a really big roll of the dice for Fiorentina, which is why I kind of went for someone who's playing regular football, impressing for their team a little bit, and they've got those regular minutes in the legs. I feel like Kostic is a bit of a roll of the dice. But again, in Football Manager, if I see him come up and as on transfer listed, I'm probably making a bid, I'll be honest, just to test the waters and think, season-long loan, just until the end of the season, see how it goes. It's definitely worth a shout, but no no mandatory purchase. Definitely not. You want to keep the door open on that one. Now, with the midfield, let's move into midfield for Fiorentina. I don't think it's terrible, the midfield. I like Mandragora. I like Caviglia. I like that they've got Fagioli. I think they've got decent players in there. It's kind of figuring out that mix and finding out which player is going to be the ball winner, right? I think Fagioli, when he's on form, when he's fully fit, he can be that guy. I kind of build the midfield around him if I'm Fiorentina and then figure out everything around him. I think he's got to be the central piece. And then maybe a Caviglia alongside him. And I don't like Fazzini too far forward and out wide. I want him kind of in that number 10 role, kind of dropping deep back into the midfield and having that 3. That's kind of how I would line up the midfield. I don't really think they need to go out and buy anyone. Like, it's not a pressing issue. For me, it's the more pressing issues are in the front line, I'll be honest. But I think that's how I'm lining up my midfield, kind of Fazzini dropping into midfield and then kind of like a free license to roam, I suppose. But how are you looking at that midfield?
No, I get that. So as I alluded to, I would have 3 at the back, but I would go for 4 in that midfield position with the wing backs being kind of up and down those kind of sides. But in the middle, obviously, it's quite critical because obviously if I'm saying there's a 3, I'm kind of seeing very similar vibes to you where Fazzini's probably that number 10 player. He's the one that drops into the midfield to make it a bit more solid in that 3 in the centre. But what I would also do is very similar to you. If there's a team, hypothetically, that's all fit, I'm like you, I would go with Fagioli. But where I kind of lean towards as part of my kind of restructuring that needs to take place in January is looking at that defensive midfielder role, which was something I alluded to previously. Since they missed Bove, they haven't really necessarily had someone that is able to get stuck in, make those challenges, able to transition the ball from a defensive to a attacking point of view. Now, previously, and I'm still going to put him out there as one of the options, would be Gianluca Busio from Venezia. I think he was someone that really was quite tidy, able to also score goals, which is, I think, a real good benefit about his game. And he's very industrious, is what I kind of see him. Because obviously you've got Amir Richardson already there. We've not necessarily seen him play in that kind of role. So it'd be interesting if Pioli kind of thinks about that. But the other name that I'm going to put out there, he's on the slightly older age, but he's been in Serie A before. He's currently in West London, and that is Sasa Lukic, who currently plays for Fulham. Okay. I don't know if that would be feasible given Fulham's predicament and position right now, but if there's an opportunity to bring him back...
He plays quite a lot of minutes for Fulham as well,
He does, but he's currently off injured at the moment. And this is why I wonder if there's an opportunity, even if, say, hypothetically, Rory, they don't play him, but he needs to get some game time, get better in terms of his fitness. This could be a perfect kind of move for him as well. Sasa Lukic coming back to Serie A, being able to dictate that midfield. We know what he did for Torino, for example. I just think he's that type of player you need to bring in. And he's got the experience as well, which is something maybe you could argue, with the exception of a few players in that midfield for Fiorentina's perspective, not a lot of them have that game experience that is able to maybe go through those grittier moments in games to like stifle the kind of attacks that you see sometimes from oppositions. I just feel that is the element that they're missing. Don't know if you feel there are any other equivalents out there that could do a role, but I was trying to be reasonable in terms of those expectations at the same time.
I'm going to kind of stick with the Torino vibe, and I'd be tempted, and it may be a bit out of the left field here, but a player like Tameze at Torino is a very solid operator. I think he's been in the league for a very long time. He's 31, so he's definitely kind of cracking on a little bit, but a bit of experience in that midfield might not go amiss. And he's someone that is just going to dictate play, win the ball, get a job done, mop up. I think he could be like, he's a key player for Torino. Like, he plays basically every minute. Like, he's playing a lot. But I think a player like that with a bit of experience could come in and shore up that midfield. But if I'm looking through Fiorentina's like options, they've got some exciting midfielders coming through who are young, like players like Sharon Dorr and these players that are like even Sabiri, who's like, sorry.
they're on the cusp.
Yeah,
They're just kind of
absolutely.
almost there, right? But they're just not maybe what I'd say ready for the first team. Almost, they feel like they've had opportunities, but they've not necessarily taken them.
Yeah.
And that's where I mean about that experienced kind of head in that midfield, just to able to guide those kind of younger players through those moments. I think you just need to get the perfect blend in terms of balance of the squad, being able to do the things that we're saying, which is there's a lack of goal creation, but they're also defensively quite poor. So you kind of need someone that's that equilibrium in those positions where you're able to allow that kind of winger to bomb on or wing back, whoever it be, but then you're also allowing that protection from if you're going with a back three or as you want to go back four, then you still need that industrious kind of midfielder to be able to get stuck in. And I think that's the element that I would say when you're looking at it from a point of view, whether it's 4-3-3 or as I would go 3-4-3, then you still need to have that flexibility within your systems. And that's probably where I'm leading towards, is that that's what feels is like it's missing from Fiorentina's side, is that midfielder that can get stuck in. And if you look at, say, for example, Milan, Inter, for example, or Napoli, there's always about 2-3 that can do that kind of role. Whereas if you look at Fiorentina, I'm struggling to name even one of them that can actually get stuck in.
Yeah. And then if we go into the front line, now I'm not sure how I'd like, mine's very much a 4-3-3, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of a 4-2-3-1 when Fazzini pushes forward. But what I'm concerned about, I really like Gudmundsson. He's a very good player. I don't know how well he does out wide. He has played out there. He is capable of playing out on the kind of the left wing a little bit more. I think you could have him with Moise Kean as the central point, but then they need another winger. This is where I'm kind of looking at Lauriente from Sassuolo or bringing in Kuhn from Como. Like a player and I know Como are kind of on the way up, maybe ahead of Fiorentina at the moment. But if I'm Fiorentina, I'm seeing how much Lauriente really wants that move out of the club. And I think he's a player that most teams in the league should be looking at, really. Again, still pretty young. He's getting a few goals. He's impressed in the league before. And I think having him as an out-and-out winger would add so much to this team in terms of being able to play as the inside forward, cutting in and taking shots, but also getting those crosses in for Moise Kean. I think Kean obviously has to be the focal point of this attack. I'm a little bit concerned about Gudmundsson. So maybe you could have them two as a front two, and then you need someone in behind them. But I want them to have attacking width. So again, you're not relying on the defending, you're not relying on the wing backs too much for attacking output. So for me, it has to be Lauriente, but he's kind of my pet project at the minute. He's one of my many pet projects. I'm linking him to every team because I really, really like him. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be against it, but I also kind of see his form so far and kind of go, well, we haven't actually seen him at his best, have we? We haven't actually seen him do as well as we anticipated. So I think there is a player there to be unearthed. It's without a shadow of doubt. I think you could also go to one of his teammates, Domenico Berardi, and say he'd be perfect for this team right now if he would bother to move away from Sassuolo, right? Again, that's not a perfect addition for this squad. I've put here as a potential option Daniele Maldini, because I don't think he's necessarily getting game time at Atalanta.
He needs to find home somewhere, right? I don't know when it's going to work.
Yeah, I think he got away with the fact that Monza had the time and patience for him to be the maverick within the side, right? They had the opportunity for him. Whereas I also think maybe Atalanta has been a bit lost amongst the noise of all of the players that they've got at their disposal as well. So I'm not seeing him necessarily get a lot of game time under Juric. I think that could be an opportunity to bring him in, for example. As I say, I think if you were to go in a free as well, so in my head, I've got Moise Kean and Albert Gudmundsson, because I feel like if you go with a Piccoli or a Dzeko, you're being very narrow in terms of the approach, because they're not the types to chase a ball, not able to give you that same intensity. And for me, in the system that I would be utilizing anyway, in a 3-4-3, you need your kind of third players, your side players, so to speak, to be able to apply and be full of energy to come up and down that kind of final third, so to speak. So you need players like a Daniele Maldini that can kind of stretch your defenders across as well. And I think that's the difference. But yeah, Loriente could definitely do a job without a shadow of doubt. I thought you were going to bring back Anzolo personally from Pisa.
I think we can leave him where he is, right? But there is a really exciting Uzbek striker in Turkey who is doing very well at the moment. Who I would be very keen for Fiorentina to bring in. I think he could solve all of their problems, and I get to watch him.
Adol Shmorodov.
He sounds like he's come from Lord of the Rings, and he's fantastic. I do also have to say, I do like Roberto Piccoli as a player. I like him. I think he's not fantastic, but I think he could play out wide at a push. But with him, and it's why I was kind of torn between, well, then you can have Gudmundsson behind him and Kane, and you have that kind of three, but then you're relying quite heavily. And Dodo offensively is very good, but you're relying so much on your wing-backs to get forward then. But maybe if you bring in Valeri, then maybe you do have a little bit of balance, threat on both sides. But I think Piccoli shouldn't be ignored. He had a very good season at Genoa. I think obviously called up to the Azzurri as well. Like, he's doing very well. He was inches away from an incredible goal in one of the games. I can't remember what game it was now. It was against Bologna. I can't remember. He absolutely cracked the crossbar. But I do think there's space for him in the team. So if this is what we would do, what do we expect Pioli to do? How do we expect him to turn
the opposite?
Yeah, well, exactly.
The opposite. I think he's going to have to change it up personally in terms of the choices that he goes for, right? So if you look at the Milan team, obviously, I think you've got to look at it as you've got to match them up from a midfield perspective. You can't allow Modric, for example, to have too much time in the final third. You need to make sure that he has as little time on the ball. The problem I've got is that when it comes to possession stats, with Fiorentina, they've not necessarily been the best, but they're also not doing much with the ball, and that is the biggest thing. So you need to have some attacking outlets that are able to expose them from a wing-back position. Now, if I'm looking at it, I think you've got to go like with the mindset of defensively, maybe that's where they're most fragile. In particular, I'm thinking Pavlovic. If you're going to try and attack one side of it, that's probably the side that I'd be trying to attack down. Obviously, I don't know whether it'll be Kataseki or whether it'll be, for example, Estebanan who will be on that left-hand side. But I think, obviously, if you're looking at Dodo, you're probably asking him to do a job, go as much as you can, just trying to get into those kind of positions to get the ball into the box or into a final third position. You're probably, for me, Roy, you're probably looking at a number 10 from a Fiorentina point of view as well. That would be my kind of thinking, is try and make Milan think about you instead of trying to necessarily contain Milan. You've got to do something offensively, whether that be Fazzini, for example, or Sherndor. I don't think it'll be Andor personally because we haven't seen enough of him. So I think it will be probably Fazzini. But yeah, I think it looks likely that it will be Mandragora in that midfield with Cavilli. I would personally, I'd love to see Amir Richardson in that midfield mix as well, just to give it a bit more of a fighting chance in terms of being able to break the ball up and trying to counter-attack this Milan team on occasions. Because with the pace of Moise Kean and inferior Albert Gudmundsson, I think there's an opportunity there for Fiorentina to get something out of the game. I mean, my question to you, though, would be how do you set it up as well? Because we were talking about hypotheticals. Would you stick with the three at the back, or as you allude to, you would change it to a 4 at the back, right?
Well, I would, but I think obviously Pioli's going to stick with the 3. But the most important thing, and you've already said it, is just flooding that midfield. You have to just have as many people in that midfield as possible, because that Rabiot, Modric, Fofana midfield has been arguably the best we've seen in the league this year so far in terms of the fluency, the creativity, the ability to dominate and control games. So I'm just flooding that midfield. I'm trying to get 4 people in the centre if I can. Like, get Gudmundsson to drop in as well when you're out of possession. Have Kane as the focal point. But when you're out of possession, you want 4 and your wing backs just flooding that midfield to make sure there's no space at all. Because I slightly disagree with you. I think Fiorentina have to go out to spoil the party. I think they have to just go out to frustrate Milan. If they try and go out to play football, I think they're going to get absolutely destroyed. I think they have to just sit back, have solidly defensive shape, and then break when they can and hope that they get a goal. Because, look, this is a team that are not in good form. You have to start picking up some points. You have to start picking up performances, the tiny little positives that you can find. And realistically, the best result Fiorentina are going to get against Milan, now this will be, they'll win now, but the best result they're going to get is probably a draw. So I think for Pioli, against his old team, there's a lot of narrative. I think you have to just be like, we are out to frustrate and just come out with something. So I'm just flooding that midfield, keeping it super tight and hoping that a ball over the top, Kane can latch onto it and finish like he did in the last game, basically. I think. And then after this game is out of the way, you can start looking at, okay, what type of football are we trying to play? What is the formation we want to go with? Because I think, obviously, they've got Milan. Then they've got that's Milan's
They've
fixtures.
got Bologna.
They've got Bologna, which is a massive game. So maybe even after Milan, you're struggling. But then they've got, oh my God, they've got Inter away.
Inter.
The next
That's
easy
what I mean.
game.
That's what I'm saying. It's not that simple, Rory. You said it like, just get a result. It's not that simple. You have to build on something here. You have to build on something.
But then, okay, so then for the next 3 games, you've got Milan away, Bologna at home, and Inter away. 2 of those games, you're going to be camped in your own box. Milan away and Inter away, you're not going to turn up and play football. So start getting some defensive solidity. Just start.
That's what I mean. So you're going to have to at least go for something like a 4-5-1, or you're basically compacting that midfield. So I think we're probably both in agreement that you probably can't go head to toe or toe to toe with them in that respect. So you're going to have to make sure that you actually outsmart them. I think what you've got to do is, as you allude to, do the basics. I think they're going to have to be gritty in terms of the defensive duties. It probably is a back 4 for me against this Milan squad, just to allow that extra man in that kind of situation being able to maraud with that ball into the midfield. Thereafter, though, you do want someone to be like, whether that be Fagioli, for example, or Giacomo Fazzini, being able to kind of float between the attacking lines. You want him to be able to help Moise Kean to transition that ball, whether it comes from that kind of wing position, or whether it goes centrally. I think more likely it's going to be from a wing back position, to be brutally honest, because like I say, I identify possibly that left-hand side is going to be possibly Milan's weakest area. That is where I probably see it, because if you look at the other side, there may be moments where Salamakers does make a marauding run and you're going to have to counter-attack. Will someone like a Gosens be quick enough to kind of take advantage? I'm not too sure. But then thereafter, we're assuming it's probably going to be a Tomori or Gabbia in that kind of right-sided kind of central defensive duties. So I think it's going to be not as straightforward. I think you're then kind of reliant on an Albert Gudmundsson to kind of stretch those defenders, make those runs. And I think that's where my skepticism is at the moment, because if you're trying to at least focus on Moise Kean, then you are reliant on the midfield position kind of being able to kind of break through. And I wonder if you go with a 5, you're probably setting up to try and match them, and whether there's that enough energy, enough stamina to support Moise Kean in those attacks, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Gudmundsson is the only one really who, when he gets the ball, is quite good at progressing with the ball, running with the ball. But we've not really seen the player that we saw at Genoa, really. He's not hit those heights. But I think he's the one that, you're pinging it to him for him to hold it up and get it to Kane, right? I think those two are by far their biggest attacking threats. So with those 3 games in mind, Milan away, Bologna at home, and then Inter away, are we looking at a Fiorentina team that goes 9 games without a win at the start of the Serie A season?
I mean, very feasible for that to happen. Very feasible, because I look at all 3 of those games that we've talked about, and I feel like Bologna is the almost not certain, but it is something that they could get something out of.
You have to take a point. You have to take a point.
Yeah, but it's Italiano coming back to Fiorentina. He'll have something to prove, won't he?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that straightforward. And
no, absolutely.
And this is where I worry for them. I do think, Milan isn't going to be straightforward, and Inter certainly won't be straightforward either. So I'm worried. I'm really worried. And this is where I'm possibly surprised that they haven't pulled the trigger and gone for, because I just think, okay, let's just say hypothetically, Roy, you are the chairman of Fiorentina. you've got the option to sack Pioli. Who do you bring in?
Well, this is it, and I think who do you bring in? The only name is Spalletti, but then the players need time to learn his system. It's not going to be an instant bounce back. It's not going to be an instant thing of like, okay, the results have suddenly been picked up. I think I don't blame
What
them
about
for
De Rossi?
I don't blame them for sticking with Pioli. Honestly, I don't. I think they're looking at the next 3 games and going, right, you've got nothing. We're not expecting sod all there, but then they've got Lecce at home, Genoa away. If he doesn't win either of those games, that'll take us to mid-November. I think we might see movement because then the games kind of get difficult again. But I think they've looked and gone, it's still early enough in the season, and Pioli is a manager that's clearly, it's a project manager. It's a long-term thing. Like I was saying in the last episode, like they're not going to go down, touch wood, right? They're not going to go down. I don't blame them for sticking with him because I don't think there's an obvious replacement out there. I think De Rossi is a roll of the dice.
Well, let's do the Marinakis. You could go for Sean Dyche. You've got Rafa Benitez. Big Ange might be available soon anyway.
Yeah, he could be. He could be free quite soon. But I think there's not, like, De Rossi is a roll of the dice as well, right? Like, nobody knows. Like, you look at De Rossi's management before Roma was Spal. It was pretty terrible. Now, okay, Spal were in a tailspin and it's not a great club to take over. Like, he's not really stood out anywhere except at Roma. And then there's always that voice in the back of your head, like, but was it good because it was De Rossi at Roma? Right? Was it because he was at Roma? Is that the reason why? I think that's as big a risk. Like, sacking Pioli to get De Rossi, to me, just screams a bit of a panic. 'Cause you've got one of the most experienced Serie A managers who, okay, it isn't going well, like, understatement of the year, but you're sacking him for a manager who's done a year and a half at Roma. Like, I think it would be a very brave call. So I'm not surprised they stuck with him. But are there any names that stick out for you beyond you just poaching someone else's manager? Well, I don't know, take Grosso or take, I don't know, save Gilardino from Pisa. I don't know. Like, there's not really.
Yeah, I think outside of that usual kind of mix, I would possibly dabble in De Zerbi and see if he'd be up for a different. Because I just think that basket case of Marseille, does he really want to stay into the dramas? But I know there's obviously a lot that's come out about De Zerbi himself.
I think he's.
But I think he's at that
a
point,
large
right?
part of that basket case. Like, I think he's not, like, I think he's perfectly well suited to Marseille. Like, leave him there, like, honestly.
But I also think if you're thinking about a character that will invoke maybe some kind of fight, which literally could happen as well.
Yeah. Within about 5 minutes, I reckon.
Probably. But I just think he's probably a candidate he's the type that could invoke a bit more passion out of the squad. And you never know, might actually get them performing. Because sometimes, those that are kind of placid don't necessarily get the kind of maybe the determination and motivation of these players. And I wonder sometimes Pioli comes across very quiet. I've seen him even behind the scenes, and he's not very.
Yeah, he's a gentle guy. He just comes across as
guy, right? He's a measured guy. He kind of comes across as he tries to get his message across very simply, and then he'll have his motivators, like we saw in the clip when he was at Milan, and you had Zlatan taking the credit for everything, right, in that one season. I think there's a combination going on there where you kind of feel like maybe it needs a bit of combination going on here. And I don't know if he's getting the right kind of blend, but I could be completely wrong. But I just think looking at the performances, they're not necessarily bad, but they're just not doing the basics sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really not good. It's really not good. It's just the lack of attacking output is mind-blowing. And now Kane's picked up an injury on international duty. We don't know how bad the injury is, but that's all of a sudden, like, is he going to be able to play the Milan?
Well,
against
this
Milan?
could force his hand, right? So it could mean that he'll have to go with maybe a Piccoli and Gudmundsson up front, which would stifle their potential up front, which could also mean they're a bit more rigid. It means they'll have to support the likes of Piccoli when he's holding up the ball, for example. I don't know. I wouldn't even dare go down that route of Dzeko because I don't think he could last 45 minutes, basically.
No,
But
he's
yeah,
very
it's
much
a
a
worry.
last 10 minutes option
Yeah,
right now, I think. So the
exactly.
last question really to wrap this up, I think, is what realistically can Fiorentina fans expect from the season? If you're a Fiorentina fan now, you're in your shirt, right? And you're sat there staring down the barrel of another 32 games to get through. What are you expecting from this season? How do you see it ending?
I don't know. I think if you ask the likes of Andrea or maybe Craig, they're not even actually looking at this as a positive one at the moment. I think they just don't know where the next win's coming from. I genuinely do worry for them right now. But granted, after those 3 matches that we have spoken about, it does get easier. It's just the problem I've got is what's the morale going after that Inter game? And will they have the fight to try and get those 3 points? Because you think they would need to get some points on board. I don't feel confident that they can. So it's a worry because I think, look, on paper, this squad should be nowhere near the relegation zone. This is probably a squad that should be at least mid-table at its worst.
We were expecting Conference League, right? Because that's what they do best. But we were expecting Conference League, maybe a Europa League push.
Annoyed with that, right? They've had enough of that competition.
You know what? We'll just go in Serie B. You can't make us go in the Conference League if we get relegated.
They haven't even built a stadium by the time they're in Serie B anyway, so
it'll fit the regulations down there. It'll be fine. But I think all I can see now is just so much pressure on that Lecce home game now.
Massively,
an incredible amount of pressure on that. And that's a Lecce team that have just won away. Okay, Parma are no great shakes either, but they've got one more win than Fiorentina so far this season. But Lecce have just won away there. They're going to be playing Sassuolo at home next, which is a huge game. They could be coming into that Fiorentina game in quite decent form and a bit of confidence.
Yeah.
It's just a huge amount of pressure because then if Fiorentina do somehow I'm just going to say not win against Lecce at home, then all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, well, who are we going to beat this year? Which teams can we realistically beat?
And let's say hypothetically Pioli's there, that atmosphere will be toxic. That after that Lecce game,
they'll be outside the training ground. They will be outside the training ground. Like, it's going to get poisonous.
It's going to be so bad. It is going to be so bad. And I feel the writing will be on the wall. The writing will be on the wall. There's no turning back. But they've got to go for a plan B. They've got to get a plan B ready because it feels inevitable.
It does, unless Pioli listens to our podcast and goes out and spends quite a lot of money that the club potentially doesn't have in January. Then it will be fine. If you can heed our warnings, maybe they can make a difference. I really just want Valeri to get a big move as well. I like him at Panama. I think he kind of deserves a move as well. And of course, Armand Lauriente. But we will see.